All right, guys, so we're gonna be making cinnamon buns today. So before you get started, make sure you preheat your oven to 375 degrees, okay? Now, let's make that dough. So for this, we need 2 3/4 cups of flour, which I already have pre-measured in my dry mixing bowl here, but there's other dry ingredients that go with it. So we also have 3 tablespoons of sugar. Remember, I use coconut sugar, that's why mine is brown in color. However, it will have the same function as white table sugar would. There's also a teaspoon of salt, and there is 2 3/4 teaspoon of yeast. Pour it in. And those are our dry ingredients. So now when it comes to making any type of yeast dough, you have to understand that yeast needs a few things in order to activate. First of all, it needs warm liquid. In this case, it's going to be milk, which I'll get to in a second. It also needs sugar because it eats the sugar, but it also needs salt to control the growth so that it doesn't grow too much. You see, yeast is a leavening agent. And so what that means is that once it is alive, it's a living organism, it's alive. But once it wakes up with that warm water between 105 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit, then it starts to eat the sugar. So it's eating the sugar and it starts to create carbon dioxide bubbles as a byproduct. Those carbon dioxide bubbles, that's what creates the dough because it gets trapped in the gluten, in the flour, and it creates bubbles. All right, the bubbles is what makes your dough expand and get bigger. All right. Anyway, that process is called fermentation, and when you let your dough rest in order to grow and poof up, it's called proofing. Anyway, but those are the ingredients, the dry ingredients for my dry bowl. So now I'm going to mix it up with a whisk. So I grab my whisk and I'm mixing up those dry ingredients until they're all combined. Now, I'm going to add the liquids. So for this, I have 3 tablespoons of butter, and I also have 3/4 cup of milk, okay? Now I need to microwave these. So I'm going to pour the milk into my bowl here of the 3 tablespoons of butter, okay? And I am going to microwave it. I'm going to microwave it for 30 seconds because I don't want to microwave it for too long, but you want to make sure that it's warm enough to wake up the yeast. And there you have it. So you microwave it. I started with 30 seconds, but if you need to use more time than that, then you could do so. You want to microwave it until the butter has melted. And I used a fork to try and break it up a bit because sometimes the butter may still be in its block, but if you just use a fork, you'll notice, oh, it's actually melted. I just had to break it up. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my warm milk and melted butter into my dry bowl of ingredients. So I'm going to create a well here, and then I'm going to introduce liquids in there, okay? And then I'm also going to add my ½ teaspoon of vanilla extract along with an egg that I am going to beat first. So I crack my egg into a separate bowl, make sure there's no shells. I'm also going to use a fork to beat it. And I'm going to add that in there as well. We're going to make a nice soft dough for this. Okay, You want to stir it until the dough starts to separate from the edge of the bowl as such, and it is elastic, okay? So now I am going to knead my dough. So first I'm gonna start in the bowl. I'm gonna use my hands, and I am going to basically fold it and press down. So that is basically how you knead your dough. And so the purpose of kneading the dough is to develop the gluten in there, all right? So it's a series of folding and punching down or pressing down with the heels of your palms, yes? So I start in the bowl just to make sure that it's all uniform before I turn it out on my lightly floured surface, and then I'll knead it a little more on the lightly floured surface, okay? And so now I'm ready to take it out. See, left the bowl clean, okay? And so I am folding and pressing down, as you can see. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to let my ball of dough here, I'm gonna let it sit, I'm gonna let it rest for about 3 minutes. So this process now is called proofing. So as the yeast is continuing to eat that sugar and producing its carbon dioxide, as I just developed those gluten strands, now I'm gonna let it ferment, which means the yeast, again, it's developing that carbon dioxide, and you let it rest so it can work its process of fermentation and have the gluten strands encapsulate those carbon dioxide bubbles. This is called proofing when you let the dough rest. So set it, forget it for 3 minutes. So while I'm waiting for the dough to proof and rest, I'm gonna start making the filling. So that's 3 tablespoons of butter, a 1/3 cup of sugar. Again, I use coconut sugar, that's why it's brown in color. You can choose to use brown sugar, a 1/3 cup of brown sugar, or white sugar, doesn't really matter. And a tablespoon of cinnamon, all right? So I'm gonna add the cinnamon to my sugar, and then I'm going to melt the butter. So now I'm going to roll out my dough, okay? So similar to how we rolled out the pastry dough in order to make pie crust, we are going to roll it forward and then roll it back. And just keep doing that until you flatten it out. Okay, and so you want to roll it until it's about 14 inches by 9 inches. Okay, kind of have to eyeball it. There are some professional demo kitchens or demo tables that have a little ruler on the side to guide in this process. However, this is Miss Beck's kitchen, and well, I don't have such things here. We don't even have it at the school. All right, so anyway, once it's about 14 inches wide, or 14 inches long and 9 inches wide, okay? Then you are going to take your melted butter, you're going to brush it on, okay? All right, and then we have our cinnamon and sugar. I'm gonna take a fork, mix it together. And then I'm going to sprinkle it on as evenly as I possibly can. We're gonna roll it up, and that's what creates that little cinnamon swirl. So The recipe does say you need 2 people to do this. I'm only 1 person though, so wish me luck. So I'm gonna take it and I'm going to tightly roll it up. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slice into it. But we're not going to slice into it with a knife. Rather, we're going to be using something different. We're going to be cutting it with a thread, or in my case, because I don't have any thread around right now, we're going to be using some dental floss. So anyway, I grab the dental floss, going to go under it, and I'm going to put it together and going to pull until it slices it. And then once you cut it all up, then you put it in a baking pan that has been greased, and then you bake it for 25 to 30 minutes at 375 degrees.